John Davis, a former coach, football trainer, and friend who's been around the gridiron game for decades, is joining us here in the program today. You may have heard him on his podcast For the Good of the Game on the SHN. John stops by the Pigpen to talk about a new developmental league called the MLFB that he's involved with, and their plans for start preparing folks for higher levels of pro football. We'll find out more about this project in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we have a very interesting guest and topic to talk about in this episode, as we have another football league that is going to be starting up that's bringing some excitement to the professional football world, and that is the MLFB. And we're going to go into some more detail with our friend and fellow podcaster on Sports History Network who has some association with the league, John Davis. John Davis, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Thanks, Darren. Great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, we're sure glad to have you here and to talk about this new exciting league that's coming up here, and we'll get to that in a moment. But I was talking with you earlier. You know, we've talked quite a few times, and we've been friends for probably about a year now. And I've never had you on the program, and I kicked myself for that, and I apologize for that here publicly to not having you on, because you have a lot of interesting things to say. So maybe you could start off by telling the audience a little bit about yourself, your background in regards to football.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I appreciate it. And please don't apologize. I'm honored to be here. So it's, I'm one of those guys that is kind of a bona fide self-described football junkie. I started playing ball in Birmingham, Alabama in third grade and played all the way through my freshman year of college. And probably my bigger growth in the game happened when I became a dad. I was on active duty for 23 years in the Army. And
thank you for your service.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. I coached all four of my children growing up, and that was because I was on active duty and gone so much. That was really my quality time with my own kids when I was home. And we really created time to build a family situation around sports. So I have 3 boys and a girl. My daughter's the youngest. They now range in age from 28 to 35. And I coached all of them in every sport they played when I wasn't deployed. And mainly that was baseball and football. And so I continued to coach and ended up accumulating, over the years, 20 plus years of coaching in youth sports up through high school, including 12 years of that in football. And at the end of my time with the government in 2011, I was offered a job as the director of operations for Football University. And for fans, current day fans that watch a lot of high school football, the parent company for FBU, or Football University, was All-American Games, and they were the ones that originated the U.S. Army All-American Bowl All-Star Game in San Antonio every year. And so I became the national director of operations and ran that program for about a year and a half. And I made a tremendous amount of friends with guys who had played in the league. So part of my job was to locate, interview, and hire former NFL players and coaches to be coaches at our football camps for middle school and high school students. And lo and behold, several years down the road, after I had finished with that gig, Wes Chandler, the former San Diego Chargers and University of Florida Gator Hall of Famer, called me and said, "Hey, we got this league we're working on, wondering if you'd help out." And I was hired as the director of tryout camps, and I ran all their pro day tryout camps for several attempts to get the league off the ground. Unfortunately, those attempts failed. Anybody that's ever been involved in professional sports leagues on the management or side certainly recognizes it's a very risky and hard to do thing. I mean, look at how many leagues have tried and failed. And but this time coming up this spring, our prediction is cleats in the grass in 2022 with Major League Football. And we're super excited. that we're going to get started. We're working feverishly on a very short timeline to try and launch this year. And I'm anxious to talk about at least most of the things that we can.
Okay. Well, so let's get into it here since you segued into it here. I do want to talk. Don't let me forget to talk at the end. We'll make sure we mentioned your podcast and everything.
Okay.
What goes on with that. But okay. So tell us, what is Major League Football and what sort of differentiates it from other brands of football? Like you mentioned, there's been a lot of leagues that have popped up and gone by the wayside.
Well, there are a few nuances that make it different from the current or even former USFL or the upcoming XFL. All of these are considered developmental leagues. And that's the push behind that is that for a lot of football fans, they may not know that behind the scenes for the last probably decade, maybe 15 years, there's been this kind of pushback from NFL coaches that guys coming out of college just simply are not prepared for the speed of the NFL game. And when you look at the programs around the country that have great success, your Power 5 conference teams, and even some of your major non-Power 5 schools, they tend to, the coaches are hired to win games. They are recruiting players to fit their system, and that system may or may not reflect a nuanced approach to the NFL game. So you get guys running a spread or an RPO or whatever, and there are certain techniques and things that tend to be taught that aid in the execution of that offense or defense and not necessarily translate to getting that player fully prepared to go to the NFL and succeed. So the need began, and it was largely driven by a lot of guys who had played in the league, to say, how can we put together a developmental league that takes advantage of coaches that have the experience at the highest level and certainly a lot of years in college as well, and get these guys ready mentally, emotionally, and physically to play at the NFL level. Or in some cases, maybe some guys get picked up by the CFL. So the nature of the developmental league was really driven by a purpose of preparing guys. Some guys have the work ethic and the talent, and some guys manage to get through and maybe succeed in college, but not necessarily be prepared for the NFL. We want to be able to provide a platform where players can get instruction and get exposure so that between those two, they can prepare themselves to be recognized and possibly offered a contract to play. I said they're slightly nuanced from the other leagues in that the original intent and the current intent for MLFB is to be completely non-adversarial with the NFL. We want to be totally developmental, and we have said there will be, no restrictions on our guys. If our guys were to get offered an NFL contract in the middle of our season, we've kind of somewhat tongue-in-cheek said we'll put them in a car and drive them to the airport at halftime to get them there. It's one of those things. So we're not focused so much on winning, although certainly it will be competitive and it will be driven by, trying to win games. But it's a lot more geared toward these coaches sharing their expertise and helping players develop to their full potential to put themselves in a position to succeed at the next level. Okay. So
correct me if I'm wrong. I have an example in my head. I know we just recently had the NFL draft for 2022 get completed. And I know one of the knocks, seems like every year on quarterbacks coming out of college lately is they never, or hardly any of them have ever taken snaps directly under center. It's all shotgun or pistol formation. Is that one of the things maybe that some of the coaches will be doing, is putting the quarterbacks under center?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, they'll work on the things that a lot of quarterbacks, don't do. I mean, I talked to a high school coach several years ago who literally, the topic was how many seniors do you have to, lose every year? Well, he's in an area near Houston, Texas, where his entire varsity team was seniors. And they would reload every year because they're in such a massive district. They have all these feeder schools, and teams that are feeding them. And one of the things that they did was they ran a see me offense. So their guys, literally, you see all these guys on TV and mostly at the college level, they'll line up and they'll call a few signals, and then everybody stops and looks at the sidelines, and they get, the guys hold up cards like Oregon, So yes, those types of skills that are lost in the execution, because he said, even when we do a 2-point conversion on the goal line, I go from the shotgun because we never practice it. And I don't want to increase the risk of fumbling in the red zone on a 2-point conversion when all we do is shotgun. So yes, those types of skills, when you talk about taking snaps from under center, pre-snap reads, because so much of defense in the NFL now is all about disguise. Mesh drills, simple things like handing off the football various ways. How do you disguise what you're doing? How do you become a magician in the backfield? Little bitty things that a lot of players, because they have great talent or fundamental issues were not reinforced in their college program, can pick up on all these things. And it's our intent to bring all of those in addition to, the more sophisticated aspects of the game to help these guys improve.
Okay. So you have some coaches that have had some NFL experience. I know you said you have a few that are already signed on. Are you able to talk to who those folks might be?
Absolutely. Folks can go to our website. We actually were set to announce our 4th coach, but the coach had some family medical issues and elected to decline the opportunity right now. So the 3 coaches that have been named so far, they have not been assigned to teams, but as Jerry Glanville, former head coach, NFL head coach, and obviously
pretty big name there.
College, he is, and he'll bring with him a lot of guys that I think people would recognize as well. The second gentleman's name is Terry Shea. I just did a podcast interview with him a couple of days ago for our website. That snippets of that will be coming out. Terry was a head coach twice at San Jose State and Rutgers University, but he had 8 years as a quarterbacks coach in the NFL. And he's trained, oh my goodness. I mean, I read his book called Eyes Up. He trained, independent of a team, like doing quarterback specific skill drills with guys preparing for the combine. He trained Matthew Stafford, RG3. It's a long list of very successful quarterbacks that he's worked with. So he will be one of our head coaches. And then the third gentleman is a coach that was the head coach at Ohio Dominion and worked extensively on the staff at Ohio State, named Bill Conley, who comes with a ton of qualifications in terms of his career. So Coach Glanville, Coach Shea, and Coach Conley have all been announced. They will be head coaches. They have not been announced in conjunction with a team yet, but we're really excited about finishing up the search for this, this 4th head coach and getting this underway and starting to build some publicity as we're able to about, the teams themselves and that kind of stuff.
Okay. So you're going to be starting off to have 4 teams then, to have 4 head coaches, I'm assuming then, right?
Correct. And those folks can see on the website, the 4 teams that have been announced are the Attack, the Force, the Independence, and the Armada. And it's the Ohio Force, the Texas Independence, the Arkansas Attack, and the Virginia Armada. And those we have not locked in, or we haven't announced, I should say. We're partially through the process. We have not announced the associated cities just yet, but those are soon to come. One of the things that really tried hard to do, and when I said we wanted to be non-adversarial with the NFL, is we really wanted to locate in cities where the population would support what we're doing and could get involved, and the team could get involved in the community. But we wanted to be in non-adversarial cities. In other words, we don't want to be co-located with a Major League Baseball team or an NFL team or any of that, if possible. So obviously that creates a dynamic that we've got to solve to satisfy our own intent, because there's a lot of cities that may be drooling to have a pro sports team, but may not have the facilities to support it. So that mix has to be gone through, and that process is still ongoing.
Okay. And this is going to be predominantly the games will be played in the springtime? Is that what I'm
Yes.
gathering?
In
Okay.
a perfect world, what we would like to do is have our season. I mean, the long-term goal is to have more teams. We would start this year in an abbreviated schedule with 4 teams, and we would end up with a championship game. And that's the idea, to get off the ground, get the marketing going. The website's already stood up. In fact, they just opened the store. People can go online and buy swag if they want to now. And then as we make these announcements and we prepare to go to camp, then we would begin to announce dates and the schedule and locations and all that that's being worked right now. So yes, the ordinary schedule would be that the season would run from April-ish through July-ish. So you're talking, mid-April to mid-July. And ideally, we would love to expand, and get up to 6 and 8 teams eventually, and go ahead and, begin to prosecute a full season with 2 divisions and all that kind of thing. But we want to take it slow and make sure that we do things right. One of the biggest faults you saw with the AAF, which failed most recently, and when the XFL failed the first time, is that they, again, not in a critical sense, they were just a bit extravagant, and they burned through their money so quickly, and it's expensive. I mean, it's tens and or hundreds of millions of dollars to run a football league at this level. So the idea for us is to come in and do things the right way and be competitive in terms of salaries, have great coaches that develop not only players, but also younger coaches. We even have great senior guys at all our staff levels to be able to develop, folks like athletic trainers and video guys and things like that. So I'm excited about all of it across the board in terms of, it's not just developing just football players. It's really an opportunity for a lot of people to get in at the ground floor, in some cases even at the intern level, and learn a lot of skills they could take and chase a career in a professional sports area of their own.
Okay. Now, John, this sounds like a great idea, something is really needed because, even the NFL, when they sort of vacated their own developmental leagues in the World Football League or NFL Europe or the other multiple names that they had, it sort of left a vacuum of, like you said, of players that aren't they're underdeveloped and maybe don't get to play professional ball because they're just not ready and they don't get the opportunity to, but they have all the skills and talent. Who may I ask who started this and how was the league founded? And who were you working with besides the coaches you already mentioned?
Well, there are several different folks that are no longer with the league who started early on. Rather than, I'll start off by talking about the current CEO and president is a guy named Frank Murtha. He's a longtime attorney and sports agent. He has really been the one that's held all this together through all of the struggles that we've had. There were different people involved originally. I mean, the spawn of this idea happened over 8 years ago. And my involvement has only spanned about 3.5 years actively, although I was involved on the planning level about 5 years ago. So Frank has really held it together. The league has been through some hard times. We were talking about it one night at dinner. I mean, you couldn't have written a stranger script for a football league to start off with in terms of what we've gone through. But all of those, I heard a guy say one time, if you are willing to fall on your, to fall down and get back up, you'll soon start to develop an immunity to hitting the ground. So, the old Chinese proverb about, fall 7 times, get up 8, that's kind of the mentality that Frank has worked with and held this thing together. And even after the last failure, which was pretty catastrophic from a socio-political sports standpoint, Frank continued to pursue putting this thing together and talking to investors and finding the people that were interested and felt like they could help prosecute success. And Frank has been instrumental in so many different ways in not only finding investors, but also bringing together a team. They've got a lot of different talents that Frank has brought together to put this this management team. And then, at the next level down, folks like me that are more the shakers and movers in terms of getting things started. So my job is to help put together and manage training camp for all 4 teams, for instance. And then once we finish season 1, we will revert back to what I was doing before and standardize, for instance, pro day tryouts for the different teams, and they'll run their own instead of the league running them like we did before. So there's a lot going on and a lot of great people involved. But yeah, Frank Murtha has really held this thing together and been the pivotal guy to really kick it off.
It sounds like Mr. Murtha is very persistent and consistent and very dedicated, because if you go back 8 years, I mean, think about what's happened in the last 8 years in the world, in the world of football. You had, it's probably about the same time that the AAF was thinking about starting up. I'm guessing, maybe my timetable's messed up, but in the XFL, the second time they came around, and of course COVID-19 and everything, and just to stay that persistent and to the dream of having this Major League Football come out, that's quite a testament to him.
It really is, and he's done a great job in terms of pulling together the pieces after, as a publicly traded company, there are certain things that have to be reported as you make financial decisions. And a lot of those are covered on our website, announcements of different, lines of credit and things like that. And there are reports that have to be filed with the SEC and things like that. And Frank really, he orchestrated all of that in the background while this thing was bubbling along. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity, because I know there's some great people involved. It'll be a phenomenal opportunity for young players, and in some cases, maybe some older players, to live out their dream. A lot of these guys may never make it to the CFL or NFL, but it gives them an outlet to be able to really do what they love and play at a professional level, albeit developmental. So they are a professional athlete. And that gives them some insights into whatever they're going to do. And they take those lessons and move on from there, whether it be to the next level of football or just, in business or life.
Okay. Now, I have another interesting question, and I'm not sure, maybe you have the answer to this, but I'm a former official, and I'm retired, but the zebra is still deep inside of me here. So whereabouts are you bringing the officials from? And are the officials going to be looked at as sort of a development league for them that possibly they can move on into, maybe bigger time college or professional, the CFL, NFL, and things of that sort?
Yeah, all aspects of the league will be developmental. So we have some consultants that we're using with regard to the officials, but we will have, full crews out there, obviously. And the idea would be that, we could be in every category, whether it's coaches, players, officials, and in some cases staff, we can be kind of a cauldron for development. So, there is a big problem from the youth level on up right now with officials throughout the nation. And unfortunately, at the youth level and even at high school levels, one, because many of those start out as volunteer officials. And secondly, if you work your way up, you're not making a tremendous amount of money. Most people do it out for the love of the game, whatever that game is, and they get a stipend, but they don't make a tremendous amount of money. And there's so much abuse out there. I mean, youth and high school officials, particularly volunteer kids, they're leaving in droves because they're tired of being abused on the sidelines or behind the backstop or whatever. So yes, we would, that aspect of development would be ongoing as well. I'm not sure what the starting source is. That's an issue we have not discussed publicly, and I haven't asked the question. So I can't go into great detail in terms of, are we going to a particular vendor, or is there, most of the time at the college level, for instance, you've got, you'll have A10 or SEC or, whatever groups that, recruit and train their own officials. But I'm not sure what direction the league is going, but we have discussed that there will be a developmental aspect within that arena as well.
Okay. That's very interesting. Now, Now, I know generally there's usually, and I think I saw it on the website somewhere, that there are going to be some different tweaks and innovations to the rules to possibly try them out for the bigger stages of the larger professional leagues, and maybe some innovations. I know there's some of the leagues that are going on right now are trying some things out that maybe will be in mainstream football. Do you have any of those in mind that you're going to be trying, or any you're allowed to talk about?
Well, we've looked at a number of different things. I mean, essentially, it will be NFL rules as the overarching execution model. But we've looked at some alterations in terms of special teams with kickoffs as far as extra points go. Actually potentially having not just a 1 and 2, but a 3-point play, and some variations, but the overarching structure would be very NFL-like, if you will. I mean, it's going to be pretty much universal football. They do want, obviously, the players to have fun and enjoy themselves, but there is not necessarily the emphasis on the entertainment factor that you see like in the XFL. I've watched some of the USFL games, and quite frankly, I've thought that they were pretty routine in terms of their execution with regard to what we're talking about. But no, we haven't looked at anything super wild, just a few variations, and really emphasizing safety of the players over everything else, and saying, how can we run a great, fast-paced, competitive game and make sure we keep the players safe, and introduce a few things that will give us a little bit of a niche here and there, but nothing that's going to be really radically changed from the game of football.
Okay. That makes it nice and simple for us fans. You get used to the NFL rules, and it's hard for fans to understand the differences. Like when you watch a college game or a high school game, some of the items are very much different, like pass interference and some of the rules like that. And, even the enforcement of some of the rules are much different. So that'd be good to start off with that basis of NFL rules, because that's probably what the general public is most familiar with as far as football rules. So very good.
Well, and there are a lot of little nuanced differences between the field and the execution between the college and NFL games. I mean, most fans are familiar with, in the NFL, having to have 2 feet down inbounds, and college is only 1. Those kind of things are fairly simple, but there are, as far as the evaluation, and from what you were talking about before, from the zebra standpoint, the officials have different sets of considerations in certain types of situations between the college and pro game as well. So I don't think those will be radically different, but we have not talked about them in detail.
Okay. So that was my next question. I was going to ask if the field is going to be the same as an NFL, or if it will be more like a college field. The major differences, I believe the goalposts are a little bit different distance, and definitely the hash marks are much wider in college and high school than they are in the pro, which are pretty much even with the uprights, I believe.
Yeah, it'll be a more of a standard NFL layout for the field, with the narrower uprights and the narrower hash marks as well, as you point out. But everything else in terms of the dimensions of the field is, it's still 100 yards with 10-yard end zones, 53.5 yards wide, so on and so forth. Dimensionally, it's the same as what people are used to seeing.
Okay. Well, it sounds very exciting. And I'm not sure if we even mentioned it here, but the website, we got to get that out there, mlfb.com. We'll have that the address in the show notes, as well as some contact you can get to hear John more on his podcast that we want to talk about here too. And I apologize, we neglected to do that so far. But John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast that you have on the Sports History Network, and a little bit about that as well?
Well, I abbreviated season 2. I've done 2 seasons so far. It is called For the Good of the Game. And I do have an active website that has both the audio version and the video. I haven't done video on 100% of my episodes, but the majority of them are on YouTube. So the website itself is forthegoodofthegame.com. The YouTube site is For the Good of the Game. And all of the streaming platforms, as far as Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, all of those. My podcast is on all those in audio format. So I started out several years ago, and I was trying to come up with an idea. And interestingly enough, my very first interview, David Diaz-Infante, who played for the Denver Broncos, won a couple Super Bowl rings as an offensive lineman. He's a good friend of mine. And we were chatting. I was literally out driving Uber in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was talking to him on the phone in between rides. And I said, yeah, I'm going to call the show Old Dogs and New Tricks. And because most of the guys I was interviewing were not current day NFL players. And he said, that would be good. And I said, yeah, the byline will be for the good of the game. And he said, oh, no, you want to make that the name of it. So I credit him with actually naming my podcast. But we've done interviews. The first season was about football insights and life skills. We had a tremendous lineup of guys. And the second season, which got a little bit abbreviated because I moved from Kentucky to Texas, and just there was a lot of turmoil in the move. So that season was focused on relationships. Some very interesting interviews. We were blessed to have Anthony Munoz and Jim McNally, who were together at Cincinnati, Bruce Smith and Ted Cottrell, who were together at Buffalo, and several other, I have coach and player, and it's really been cool. But yeah, we've had some big name guys, but interestingly enough, and I've commented on in a different format with you before, it's interesting that sometimes the lesser known non-celebrity guys who have huge followings, high school coaches, for instance, that have been high school head coaches for 20 years, have as many views in some cases in my episodes as some of the Hall of Famers. So I do it because I love to talk, if that's not completely obvious already. And I love to talk about the game of football. And I wanted to be able to bring a forum and platform where people that are fans, and particularly kids, could learn a lot about the game from the inside out, from players that had experienced at the highest level what it takes to be able to play. And I think that I've achieved that, and I'm hoping to kick off season 3 here later this year.
Well, you are definitely a busy man here with all your football fronts going up here and the moves and everything else. And we applaud you for that and appreciate everything you do. And folks, it's a really great podcast. I think I've listened to probably just about every episode you have out, and some of the interesting ones. It's great hearing the guys that retired from the NFL or coached in the NFL, or you've had current CFL players on. I know Trevor Harris, who I'm familiar with from playing my alma mater, Edinburgh University, who's playing up in the CFL now. You had him and his brother on. That was a great podcast. And you even had you even go as far as having some folks from other countries and other sports. I know you had a gentleman on talking from the aspect of youth sports and what we could do to improve them from England and soccer. I believe he was from England, maybe Ireland. Yeah,
there's a gentleman in the UK, Gordon McClelland, who has an organization called Working with Parents in Sport, and they just published a tremendous line of books for sports parents, and they're a multitude of different sports and age levels. And Gordon was a great resource. So it was really fun having somebody, to kind of juxtapose that particular episode. I had Heath Esslinger on with him, and Heath does a similar thing here in the United States. And kind of the point was, that both guys made it. Say a lot of people see what we do and they think we compete. The reality is we need many more people doing what we're doing to try to bring about some change and updates and some utility and goodness to youth sports, which has gotten a little bit crazy in terms of the greediness across the board with which people approach the industry.
I fully agree with you. And folks, you want to listen to from so many different aspects. Podcast is great. John, we really appreciate you coming on here talking about your podcast for the good of the game. We're going to put the on the show notes. We'll have links to that where you can find it, and to your website, as well as the MLFB.com, the Major League Football that John is a part of and helping to get off the ground here. And John, we sure appreciate your busy schedule coming in here and talking about these topics with us and sharing with us. And I hope you'll be on again as some maybe news breaks or anything. We'll be glad to have you on again to talk more about it.
Yeah, it might be kind of fun. We'll have to see how it rolls out. But once we settle and announce when we're going to do training camp, maybe we could even work out, doing a live episode from training camp. That might be kind of fun to talk about how things are going during the season.
Absolutely. I'm game if you guys are. That's definitely for sure. So I appreciate it, John, and thank you very much.
You're welcome, Darren. Thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandom at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.